Hello. I know it's been a while, but my name is Jack, and welcome to a new series, I guess. I'm going to test this out and see if I enjoy making it more than the DM journal, which I just didn't enjoy recording or making in any way. It just felt like a chore, and no one watched it, and it just wasn't very fun, so I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to try this instead. This is a campaign diary for a campaign I just started that working title is called The Heroes of the Sanction. This is a campaign that I have decided to play with some people I've played before, some people I haven't played before, some are quite new, some have played for a long time, and I'm very much trying to emulate a lot of the things that Matthew Colville has talked about on his streams, his campaign diaries, and his running the game videos. There's a lot of really, really good advice on there. I've plugged Colville constantly throughout me recording stuff on here, because his stuff is just really, really good. Like, really high quality, just good content. But there are a few key pieces that I have always found interesting about Colville's work that I've always wanted to replicate. The first one being his sandboxing. The way he sandboxes, just dotting adventures all over the place. I've always wanted to try it, and I love it. I love the concept of it, and I read through some of his most liked adventures, most notably Keep on the Shadowfell and Against the Cult of the Reptile God, and I decided I'm going to use those because they're cool as hell. So those are dotted around, and I've made a few adjustments to them, and I'm going to make more adjustments on the fly, but I have a group of 6 players, all starting at level 1, who at the end of the first session, which we are going to talk about in a moment, have reached level 2. We are playing weekly at the moment, but we will eventually have to switch to bi-weekly due to scheduling problems and stuff like that, but that's not for another few weeks. But basically, the other thing I wanted to emulate from Colville's stream is Collabris. I watched the Collabris streams, not live because I can't stay up that late. I'm English, in case it wasn't obvious, and 3 a.m., 3 a.m. is pretty standard for me, but like 6 a.m., it's probably not such a good idea. So I didn't do that. Instead, what I did was I watched them back a little while after they came out, and I love them. I love Collabris as a setting. It's insanely interesting. I want to run it, and now I am. I'm running Collabris as we speak. I'm following some of Colville's advice, starting them in Haldrim, the western country in Collabris. I've made some edits to Collabris as a whole. There's a few factions and aspects of Collabris that I have altered in very specific ways, a few places I've changed the name of, a few people I've changed the names of, and some evil villainous plans I've dotted all over the place for the characters to find in future, because that sounds fun as hell. And basically, I'm going to talk about the first session, and I'm going to talk about how it went, I'm going to talk about what happened first, and then I'm going to move on to how I think it went. I will preface by saying I think it went very well, and the players certainly seem to enjoy themselves a lot. I enjoyed myself a lot, and I'm hoping that it will be just as fun to talk about as it was to run. And so far it is, and I've not even started talking about it yet, so, that's always good. So, I will start from the top, and I will go through and I will explain what happened, and then I will go through and analyze the things that happened, and talk about what I think went well and what I think went very wrong. But first, I need to talk about the party members. I have a party of 6 players and, 6 characters. The players I have are Ethan, Joe, Diarmait, Alice, Rose, and Olly. And they have their 6 characters. Joe is playing Mox, a Kobold Cleric of Order. Olly is playing Gyro, a Dragonborn Paladin of Rebellion. Rose is playing Aerynthana, an Elf Vigilante. Alice is playing Dandelion, a Mousefolk Rogue. Ethan is playing Althaea, a Half-Elf Sorceress. And Diarmait is playing Moldahl Seywood, the Human Paragon. There may be a lot of sort of subclasses or references to things that don't make a lot of sense. That's because there's a lot of homebrew in here. There's also some unearthed arcana in the form of the Order Cleric, and there is some stuff from the DM's Guild, most notably Mark Humes' Vigilante, which is being played by Rose. There was also the Paragon, which I found on Reddit, which I will find a link to and put in the description. I've made a few minor edits to it, but for the most part, it's a pretty interesting class, and I look forward to seeing what Dermot does with it. And now that is the party. I will get into the party's backstory at some point when it becomes relevant, because a lot of it isn't relevant right now, and very little has been revealed in regards to the history of these places and these people. So, starting from the top, I started with a cinematic of sorts, less cinematic-y than Colville just murdering some people, and more sort of a pan shot, if you will. And I started from Dandelion's perspective. I did a brief sort of prologue of sorts where I talked about a little situation that the characters got themselves in that they were captured, and I described it in a somewhat comedic way that I feel resonated quite well. It wasn't super serious, and I think the campaign as a whole is going to sort of be a relatively light tone, but obviously with moments of very serious interaction, which I feel is peak D&D, but not necessarily how everybody likes to enjoy it. I do like to add a lot of sort of comedic narration to the way I describe a story, just because the players find it, the players enjoy it a lot more, basically. But basically, the players were captured. Basically, the players have been captured, and I figured this is a good way to start a campaign, either on the road, already doing a task, or in a situation. Either of those things work really well, and it's a really quick, easy, and fun way to start any campaign, within reason. And it's how I will be starting pretty much every campaign I run in future, because it's so easy, and it's so great. But characters, I start from Dandelion's perspective, and I describe as she looks around at all of these other individuals. She sees this blue-scaled kobold, half asleep under a shield. She sees a tall, rail-thin elf woman, a human man with silvery hair, a half-elven woman, and a huge black dragonborn. And that kind of layout, and I added a lot of sort of comedic effects, because Dandelion is from basically the middle of nowhere and has no knowledge of what any of these creatures are, and she knows what an elf is, and this is the first time she's ever seen one, so I'm sort of describing, like, you think that one is an elf, but one of them looks less elfy than the other. You're not really sure, like, that kind of sort of vaguely comedic sort of referencing to Dandelion has very little interaction with the rest of the races. And I basically had, so in this, she realized she was in a cave, and these other characters were in separate cages around this room. In the center of the room is a fireplace and a man sharpening a very shitty looking sword. This man is Raim, one of the 8 named, charactered, and heavily detailed bandits I created for this opening encounter. I will get into why I did that later on, why I made these, what would otherwise just be faceless mooks with a named leader, why I did this, and I will get to that later. But Dandelion asks some questions, mostly why are we here, where are we going, and Raim very nonchalantly says, yeah, you've been kidnapped, and we're taking you somewhere. And before Dandelion can ask where, another man comes in. It's a small, scrawny, blonde-haired man comes in, barely a man, a boy, sort of 18, 19 years old, but looks younger. He comes in, and basically in his most demanding and proclaiming voice that he and his troop are taking the characters to an individual, and he goes to say who, and there's a stammer and a stop, and he leans over his shoulder and yells at someone and asks this person he's yelling at, Kano, who are we taking them to again? There's about a 10-second pause, he gets no reply, and then the rest of the characters are awoken by him yelling. Some of them ask questions. Olly immediately jumps into just being banterous and having his character be this paladin that doesn't care, this paladin of rebellion that just snarks at everything he sees. And it's great. There's him and Alice playing off each other for sort of a few seconds, actually. It was a really strong interaction. Alice was deploying a really heavy French accent, which Alice does very well. because she speaks French. To my understanding, she speaks French anyway. I'm not sure how fluent she is, but I know she speaks, at the very, very least, rudimentary French. But, like, that interaction was I feel, a really strong setup, and it was really good. Whilst this is happening, over in the corner, Dandelion has also noticed a man drawing blood from this half-elven woman, Ethan's character, Althea's neck. And the blood comes out as this dazzling silver color. And what this is, none of the players know. Althea herself has no idea, but she is a wild magic sorceress, so that probably has something to do with it. And this young man, Martinus, who was yelling around a little while ago, this young man is basically then, he goes to try and talk again, and is then interrupted by another woman coming in. This woman is Ellen. She is another one of these bandits, and she is a cleric of sorts. She's a fairly weak cleric. She only really has access to Spare the Dying and Sacred Flame. And I did that for a very specific reason, mostly to make her, or the bandits as a whole, manageable, considering there's 8 of them for a first level party, and even then they were pretty strong. And she basically comes in and offers to send letters to the characters' families, and she seems very sad and regretful about the fact that the characters are all being sent to their deaths, or potentially their deaths. And if not, their enslavement. And she wants to send letters home to the characters' families, if possible. And this becomes prevalent later on, but Dandelion likes Ellen a lot, and like most of the players like Ellen a lot, because she's not evil. She's chaotic neutral, borderline chaotic good. And I can give you some backstory on these characters, perhaps in another time if they ever encounter these characters again. Basically, time goes on, and the players are sort of talking amongst themselves once Ellen and Martinus leave, and they're just left with Raim in this room. And this strange blood-drawing guy has gone off as well, who is later revealed to be Nico. They talk amongst themselves, like the players. They're being a little meta in talking amongst themselves, and I feel like I'm going to have to sort of get that out of them a little bit, because especially for one of the newer players at the table, they're kind of putting it into her that kind of meta, your character like anticipating things that no one knows about, like one of the players going to one of the other players, hey, I'm going to do this next round, don't do this. Like, that's questionable. Some people would argue that's fine, some people would argue that's not. I personally am not a fan of it, and I want to try and sort of get it out of them a little bit, so that'll take a little time, but I'm not too worried about it at the moment. But they talk amongst themselves, and because Raim, I drew the position out, I drew the map, and I drew it out, and Raim was facing towards, or the entrance to this cavern, and he had his back to Aeryn, Althaea, and Moldahl, allowing for Althea to use her mage hand if she rolled stealthily, which she did. Bandits don't exactly have great passive perceptions. She rolled quite high. She's proficient in stealth and has really bad dex, actually. She's not doing so hot on the AC side of things. But she uses her mage hand and manages to get her arcane focus, which is a ring, and she managed to get Aeryn's bow and a single arrow, because she rolled quite well, and I decided to sort of bend the rules of Mage Hand a little bit and allow her to sort of pick up several things at once. She could have, in theory, tried to go and get more things, but she didn't until later on. Now, the characters basically said, or the players said, that they wanted to wait a little while and wait for a good time to strike and get out, which was, a good idea. They didn't take that idea all the way to the bank, but, it's the thought that counts. They waited until the rest of the bandits came back, and they met the rest of them, and the 8 bandits in total are Amos, Ellen, Gloria, Kano, the leader, Martinus, Muriel, Nico, and Raim. These named characters have a little relationship chart that and their statistics, which I will probably put in the description of this video, so you can go and have a look at it, because it is actually really interesting. This method, this relationship chart, I took this from Death McGuns or John Battle. He is a really, really amazing creator I talked about on Charisma Check when it was airing. His relationship chart system is amazing, and I would go, ask u/Death McGuns, go look at his work. It is phenomenal. Go look at it. I can't plug his stuff enough. It's so good. You can also view this relationship chart and all the bandits in the description, which I will put down there. The characters, on the other hand, they have this idea that after they've eaten, which Gloria, the huntress, she brings back an elk. Dandelion basically says, I don't eat meat, because she's a mouse, which makes sense, as that was Alice's decision. If she's a mouse, why would she eat meat? That makes sense. So Gloria, surprisingly, is quite nice as well. A lot of the bandits aren't, but Gloria, Ellen, and Martinus, to an extent, are like okay people. And she goes and gets Dandelion some berries and some mushrooms, and she cooks those as well. And the characters are... So they eat up and they wait until the bandits have gone to bed. They have a brief interaction with Muriel when she comes in, and she sort of gloats a little bit. She's the pretty one, and she's the one that's just like, oh, look at me, I'm so pretty. And that comes to a head later on, but the characters wait until they're asleep. And Gloria and Ellen are on watch. If the players had waited, Gloria and Ellen would have gone off, and they could have used that opportunity to try and escape. Or alternatively, Dandelion, using her squirm ability that she has as a mousefolk, can move through a space that a tiny creature can, meaning that she can get through the bars with ease. And that basically means that the characters can... she can go around, she can unlock Gyro from his heavy restraints because he's big and strong. The bandits put him in a neck brace and arm shackles, and a good old Moldahl, who had manacles in his inventory, had his hands bound with his own goddamn manacles. Everybody else had their hands and stuff free. They just had no weapons, but they had all their other tools. And they didn't know that Dandelion had thieves' tools as well, because she's a rogue. And it makes sense that the thieves' tools would be hidden about your person no matter what. I thought, well, they might be in her boot or something, and Alice agreed. And thus, the characters went around, and this is where I thought they were going to wait, or Dandelion was going to sneak, or there was going to be a distraction, they said. And Dandelion says, oh, hey, can I have that letter? She says to Ellen. And Ellen's like, oh, yeah, sure. And she goes around and she gives it to Dandelion. And then Gyro says, I'll have one as well. And she goes over, goes to give the letter to Gyro. And then Gyro tries to fucking rip her throat out. And Ellen's not a fighter. She has a mace, but she's not a fighter. She is a cleric and is not a very strong one. And Gloria is very protective of her. And it's not long before the entire thing is awake. Everybody except Dandelion is still trapped inside their cell with no way of getting out. And they now have 8 people trying to kill them. And this is where combat starts. And it went reasonably well. It took a long time for them to get anybody free, because it turns out Gyro is the only person in the party who has even remotely good strength. And it took them a long time. Moldahl, being completely unarmed for most of the fight, did some interesting things by manacling, with the manacles that he managed to free himself from, thanks to Althea's mage hand earlier on. He manacled her to the bars, and they basically fought backwards and forwards. Mox was very helpful, throwing around his spells before he was instantaneously knocked out by Kano, who crit him for a lot of damage. And Mox is not very tough, and he is just a little kobold. And he went down and nearly died. He was on 2 death saving throws, and I basically said, hey, this is way too early in the campaign. I'm not going to kill your character in session 1, which some people may think is stupid, but I think that it is a lot dumber for you to just kill a character in session 1. I'm not a fan of stuff like that. Colville killing Red is one thing, but just straight up just murdering someone's character in the first session without them even knowing you were going to do it, that's pretty fucking stupid. But basically, this sort of carries on for a fair while. They manage to get Mox up eventually, and they're going down and they're non-lethally killing the bandits and stabilizing them. And Ellen has Spare the Dying, which she can also use to do that. Althea knocks out Nico really, really quickly before he can cast some of his minor spells. She uses a Chaos Bolt and does a shitload of damage to him and knocks him out in one shot. And Ellen uses Spare the Dying on him. Dandelion goes fucking apeshit on Rame and stabs him through the eye. She stabs downwards and stabs him through the jaw, so he will live, but he's not going to have a fun time. with his missing eyeball, which she just manages to heal, and Gyro, using his twin scimitars, I'm allowing him to take, at level 2, the 2-weapon fighting style, even though Paladins don't get it, because, you know, who cares? It's not that big of a deal. It's not far-fetched for a Paladin to dual wield. He cuts open Kano's stomach, but they manage to kind of, with the aid of a medicine check and spare the dying, keep him alive, and Gyro uses his lay on hands to heal Mox. A couple other people went down, but on the whole, the combat was quite long. Like, it took at least an hour and a bit. And I feel it was sort of tapering off towards the end. But once they were actually out and doing stuff and fighting, people were having a lot more fun. I think it was just down to me putting them in a situation where they didn't really have a lot of opportunity to like, get out, and they didn't know that. And also them not really waiting and just acting immediately and nearly getting themselves killed, which I will learn from, is not a particularly fantastic idea. But basically the battle is over, and they bring Kano around, and using the last of Olly's lay on hands, and they ask him, who were you sending us to? And he says that we were sending you to a place near Stolva, to a man called Calarel. I don't know him, but he has a cause that we want to join, and that cause is to kill the orcs to the north. For reference, for those of you who are familiar with Collabris, these bandits are ex-Burnt Hills bandits, meaning that they disagree with Haldrim's alliance with the orcs and want to see it gone and the orcs with it. Meaning that Kano and all of these people, within reason, have a reason to f***ing hate orcs, and most of them do. And this is why they want to join this cause of this Calarel fellow. Again, for those of you who are aware of Keep on the Shadowfell, you know who Calarel is, especially if you watch Colville stuff, and yes, I am planning on doing the tavern scene. That should hopefully, depending on where they go, be next session. And that was pretty much where we had to end, because we were heavily overrunning, we didn't start till quite late, and people had to leave, because it was rush hour, there was some sports junk on in the middle of town, so it would have been a nightmare for people for people to get home if we'd had left it any later. But that was where we had to end the session. I allowed them to level up to level 2, which most of them have done so far, and we're playing again next Saturday, so we'll get to carry on and see what happens. And now on to sort of an evaluative sort of construction. On the whole, session went very well. There was some great character interaction. Mox had a great line where he is a cleric of order. He believes in law, and would basically just tell the bandits, what you're doing is illegal, maybe you shouldn't do that. And things like that. It was very, very funny. And then Joe revealing that Mox is a massive hypochondriac was also hilarious. The face that Joe made impersonating Mox's reaction when he woke up covered in the gore of a man's guts was a sight to remember. It was great. It was a really good session. Not a lot of players. It was only really Joe, Olly, and Alice that did a lot of role-playing, but hopefully we'll get some more out of the other players as time goes on. Time will tell, though. We'll have to see. But I am really enjoying what we've got so far. And on to the bandits, the 8 bandits, these Burnt Hills bandits. I made them as they are so that the players would like them. I remember seeing a video from Taking 20 a long time ago about making bandits interesting and giving them names and motives and purposes. And I thought, I like this. I am going to use this. I've not watched a lot of Taking 20's videos before, but I do like his I forget what it's called, but his series about utilizing monsters is really good. I've seen a few episodes of it. I'd suggest you go watch it. It's quite good. I wanted to do this, and I wanted the players to sympathize with these bandits, and they did. Dandelion and Alice was genuinely terrified that she was killing these people, because most of them were okay. Moldahl was perfectly fine with disfiguring Muriel's face, because I'm not sure whether that's Dermot or Moldahl being cruel. Time will tell, and time will tell what happens with Moldahl there. But it'll take a little time for people to get sort of into character a little more. Rose, our new player, is like, she's very, very new. To my understanding, she's not played before. And if she has, she's not played very much, and she also doesn't know any of us except for Dermot. So this is all very new for her, so it'll take her a little while to come out of her shell. But the campaign as a whole, so far, is going really, really well. But some notes and some suggestions for myself in future. They engaged the bad guys whilst fully captured, because they didn't know that things were going to happen that were going to give them a chance to escape. Maybe I should have specified that. Well, I definitely should have specified that. But at the same time, it was Olly playing his character and being brash and brave. Despite being mostly completely restrained, he still tried to murder a lady. And that whilst in keeping with Olly's character, still, it's good advice for me to take into future to not do that to the same extreme again. Also, that battle was very deadly, almost entirely because Mox went down in one shot, thanks to a lucky crit, and he almost died, which is not great. There is also a thing that I have included, the injury table, a sort of altered version of Mark Humes' one from his current Erois campaign. The injury table I have is a little different in the way that it works, but it's triggered in the same way, taking a crit or going unconscious. And I kept forgetting to deploy it. People got crit, people went unconscious, but I only deployed it the once, and I need to remember it. I'm going to have to keep it open on a tab or something to remind me that it's there in the future, so I don't forget. The final sort of piece for myself is that I tied in Kano with Keep on the Shadowfell. Kano and Co. And whilst I really want this to be an open sandbox where they can choose where to go, I feel like I've already given them direction I didn't want to give them. And I kind of regret doing that. Like, there's a big part of me that genuinely really regrets doing that, but at the same time, I'm not sure for certain if it matters. I have things lined up next week that will allow them to choose to pick one adventure or the other. It entirely depends on where they go and the choices that they make. But at the same time, they have a direction now, and I'm not sure how happy I am with me having given them that. But at the same time, it feels organic. They made the decision to save him. They didn't have to. I asked Olly, do you want a non-lethal? Because Alice had been going, I want a non-lethal so far, and I think Dermot had been doing the same. So I think what I want to do is see where it goes. I have very mixed opinions of what I've done and whether I like it or not, because it was their decision to keep him alive and interrogate him and get the name, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I should have even given a name to him. So we will see. Time will tell next week what happens. If you have enjoyed this, because that is the end of this campaign diary, it's fairly long, and they will only get longer, I'm sure, but they are very fun to record, and they probably won't be too much of a pain in the ass to edit either, because I'm not going to put really anything on screen. It is just going to be, me just talking, because that's kind of interesting, I hope. But that is the end of the first campaign diary for the Heroes of the Sanction campaign working title. If you've enjoyed this, you know how YouTube works. Everybody tells you every time. There are a few buttons under the video. You can choose to press any one of those, and that number of things can also be 0 if you so choose. I don't make decisions for you. I'm not your boss. You do what you want with your time and your button pressing. That's fine. Seriously, do what you want. But if you want to press them, go right ahead. If you would like to sort of support me in any way, again, very optional. Very, very optional. I have a product on the DM's Guild at the moment called the Complete Archive of Esoteric Secrets that I made with Katie. We released it on my birthday this year, the 15th of January, and it sold really well in its first week. We got a silver medal, like a silver sales medal in our first week. Maybe just over, I forget off the top of my head. But we sold really well. The sales have tapered down a bit because it's been a while since we released it, but that is fine. I'm insanely happy with the reception it's gotten, and I would love to see people put reviews on there or look at it. So if you're interested, big portions of it you can download for free. So if you're interested in a big compendium of 160 spells, all for 5e obviously, if you're interested in that, there'll be a link in the description. Go look at it. It's super cool. I highly suggest you go take a look. It's really fun. But that is enough from me. I will see you next week for another campaign diary. I will try and edit these in a timely fashion as I make the as we play the sessions, but we will see what happens because schoolwork is heavy at the moment, so we'll we'll see. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a week. we'll see you in a week.